One of life's reality is suffering and death. Whoa. What does Jesus have to say about suffering and death? Hi, my name is Father Mike Manning. God bless you very much. Thank you for watching the program. I think you're going to be blessed by this program because we're talking about things that are very significant in our life. Suffering and death. They're not strangers. They're part of our lives. And what's the relationship between them and our commitment to Jesus? Now, we're going through the Gospel of Mark. We're looking at the 4 Gospels, but now we're looking at Mark. And of all the Gospels, probably Mark is a little bit more of a reality of, like, let's say, from the very beginning, the shadow of death and even of suffering pervades the whole Gospel. Remember, Jesus has come to show God's love for us. And in this gospel, we were able to touch the intimacy of God with us. This is a fascinating thing. The Jesus that we experience in the Gospel of Mark, his humanity is probably stronger than any of the other Gospels. Let me just kind of say this to you. And what excites me about this is that when you talk about the humanity of Jesus, you're not denying his divinity, because he was both fully man and he was both fully God. But when you think for a moment on the humanity, it opens up all kind of doors that you can say, whoa, I can relate to Jesus. I could even give my life to Jesus because God has become one with me in all of my humanity. Here are some of the just thoughts that maybe as I say these things about Jesus, think about your own life and think about how Jesus is making a connection between you and himself. Jesus waited for 30 years to begin his ministry. How many times have we wanted to know what God's will is in our life? And we wait for so long. We wait for signs. We wait for a push. And that's something that Jesus was able to experience. 30 years of waiting. When he comes down and he's baptized by John and he accepts the mission, he goes off to the desert and he's tempted. Imagine this. God wants to become one with us, and God is tempted. Oh, a beautiful thing too. He'd worked very long, and he was out healing people, he was out preaching, he was trying to do good, and he got in the boat with his disciples. He says, I need to get away. And I think we can all relate to wanting to get away. But he got into the boat and he fell asleep. Isn't that amazing? God fell asleep in the boat. And I can relate to that sometimes when I'm just physically exhausted. I don't know where to go. And the idea of sleeping is so very, very inviting and enriching. And Jesus did that. There's a story in the Gospel of Mark that's rather disturbing. And again, we're talking about the humanity of Jesus. But one time Jesus was with his disciples, and he decided to leave Israel, the land of the Jews, and go to present-day Lebanon. And when he went to present-day Lebanon, he ran into a woman who asked for a healing. And Jesus reacted in a way that seemed to be rather prejudicial. He kind of put the woman off because she wasn't a Jew. Well, the woman persisted, and she got the last word, and Jesus was able to bring a healing to the daughter of this woman who was asking for help. Interesting. There was an ingrained prejudice that Jesus dealt with. And you and I know what it is to have prejudice, don't we? About our nationality, about our sex, about our religion. And we battle against that. And Jesus was able to overcome that pervasive reality of prejudice. In the Gospel of Mark, there's a fascinating little instance. A rich man comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, what do I need to do to gain eternal life?" And Mark says in just a simple little way that Jesus looked at the man, the young man, and loved him. Wow. To imagine in this humanity God having that love relationship. Well, not only did he love, but he could also be angry. Remember the time he comes into the temple and he finds people not worshiping his father, but all concerned about changing money, and they had livestock that was going to come and be sacrificed, and there was all kind of, and he said, "Wait a minute, you're missing the point." And he was angry. And he comes in and he turns over the tables of the money changers. He turns over the people that have money. Wow. The humanity of Jesus. I think of the humanity of Jesus also in the tenderness of a woman coming in when he's lying down on the ground, he's eating, and that's how they ate. And the woman comes in and she anoints his head with oil. A tender experience of that, of intimacy. Wow. He also faces his fear. Jesus knows continually through the Gospel of Mark he's being opposed. There are people turning against him and whatnot. And he faces his fear, and he leaves Galilee, he leaves the north, and goes down to Jerusalem where he knows he is going to die. Oh, and then when he's in the desert, in the garden, when he's in the garden, imagine this, he so fights with death that he begs his father 3 times that this cup might pass from him. He didn't want to die. And imagine the humanity of Jesus is relating to you and me, and we, in our struggle to try to put away death, Jesus became one with us 3 times. One of the other aspects of the humanity of Jesus that I thought interesting was the word loneliness. Oh gosh, we want to push away loneliness. No one would ever say, "Oh, you look like a lonely person." No, I'm not lonely, and we'd get all excited about doing all kind of things to prove to other people that I'm not lonely, But you and I both know that despite all the bright lights and the excitement of the television and the internet in our world, and then the cities, and even the financial struggles that we're going through, boom, loneliness can be a very, very pervasive reality in our life. And to imagine Jesus as lonely, he waiting 30 years in the desert for 40 days, he's humble, and there the loneliness of begging for his father that the cup might pass. And then he looks and he finds that his friends are sleeping. He's all alone. And then the loneliness of dying on the cross, and the cry of Jesus is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And get this, in the words that he used in Aramaic, the people misunderstood him. Here he is, he's dying, and they misunderstand him. Talk about loneliness, dying and wanting to give your last words, and you die on the cross. Wow. That's the Jesus that we believe in, a Jesus who loves us and longs to be with us for every moment of his life, to prove to us, not just 2,000 years ago, but right now, today, I'm with you, I love you, I'm with you. The humanity of Jesus, especially when we come to that death, is a very, very powerful thing. Well, now, we're going to take a little break, but I want to talk to you about some real concrete ways in which the Gospel of Mark is orientated towards death. This thing that you and I are trying as best we can to avoid, and Jesus accepts. Let's see how this gospel helps us to understand the bridge of trying to understand death. Here's a great chance for you to discover Israel, the place of Jesus. Join me, Father Mike Manning, on a 10-day custom tour of the Holy Land. Find the Bible stories and the Gospels come alive for you as you visit Caesarea and the Roman amphitheater. Experience the Sea of Galilee on which the Lord walked. Explore Capharnaum, the center of Jesus' ministry, and find the remains of the ancient synagogue. Renew your baptism at the Jordan River, where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. Walk the Via Dolorosa and spend a prayerful moment at the Garden of Gethsemane, and many more. We can guarantee that it is surely going to be a great spiritual experience for you. Using the scripture as a roadmap of the Holy Land, this is going to be a spiritual discovery. Make your life's one-time wish come true. Call the number on the screen or email us right now for more details. I'll see you in Jerusalem. We're trying to understand the Gospel of Mark, and one of the orientations of the Gospel of Mark is it leads in many ways to the suffering and death of Jesus. How do we deal with death? Oh, it's usually the death of others, and we see it in the media. We hear about murders and even mass murders, and we struggle to avoid death. We put our seatbelts on, we drive in the right way, we pay our taxes for making sure we've got a good police force and military. We visit the doctors and we try to overcome sickness. And we try to look younger if we can with maybe the color of our hair, and it might be a tightening of the skin of where we are. But Jesus faced our fear of death. And in the Gospel of Mark, we find that pervading his life. It's like a shadow that was part of his world. It began very strongly with the beheading of John the Baptist, his cousin. He loved him. And he gets word that John was killed by Herod. His head was cut off. Almost a foretaste, if you will, to what his death was going to happen. 3 times in the Gospel of Mark, he speaks about going to Jerusalem to suffer and to die. And then on the Mount of Transfiguration, the Father comes to Jesus. And I'm sure it was a time of confusion, of sorrow, of needing support. And the Father comes and says, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. And then, of course, In the garden, 3 times he begs the Father to let this cup pass from me. In the Gospel of Mark, the crucifixion of Jesus is a very stark and almost frightening thing. The women, big group, they stand at a distance because Jesus is naked on the cross. They stand at a distance. You know? Merely 2 others are crucified with him. And the only words that come out of Jesus' mouth is taken from Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Yeah. It's interesting, there's no words about thirst that we find in others' Gospels, no giving forgiveness, no saying into your hands, and no giving of Mary to the beloved disciple, no giving up of the Spirit to the Father. A very, very strong and powerful, stark and even frightening instance of death, the death of Jesus. He did it for you, he did it for me. You know? Why did Jesus die? That's a good question, isn't it? Here's this person is only doing good. And all of a sudden we find him here naked, nailed to a cross. You know? What was it? I think as I've studied the Bible, he spoke about the temple being destroyed. And it was almost like saying this is what's going to be happening in the future, because it did happen in the year 70, and then later on in the year 150, the temple was destroyed. You know? And I think that really shook up the people of his times. And then when he came in and he turned over the tables of the money changers, and he disrupted the whole commerce of sacrifice of animals and money, ooh, they got frightened by that. In Matthew 15:10, there's even an insight that the chief priests, the people who were significant religious leaders, they were jealous of him. You know? And again, remember, Jesus was law-abiding, but he didn't let the law hold back from caring for people. And so a lot of times the religious leaders were a little bit shaken in their security. He went against laws interpreting the commandments of the Sabbath and fasting, you know. There's a statement in chapter 3 that Herodians, these were people who were tied in with Herod and whatnot, and the Pharisees, 2 really religiously different people, came together and they wanted to kill him. I think one of the other reasons was, I think the Jewish people were very nervous about the Romans. The Romans were crucifying all kinds of people. They were bringing down great oppression on the people who were living in that world. And when Jesus started to arise, and he started to work with power and goodness and sometimes shaking their security, I think in many ways they felt that they had to get rid of Jesus because he might be the one that is really going to bring the wrath of the Romans down on them. You know? Well, now we come to this question of suffering. Oh gosh, Jesus suffered, but we sure try to stay away from suffering, don't we? We don't want physical suffering. We don't want emotional suffering. We don't want spiritual suffering. And we know that suffering is sometimes caused by others, and sometimes it's caused by ourselves. You know? With our free will, we get addicted to things, and we even self-destroy ourselves, kind of giving in to our sinful nature. Well, suffering is interesting. Suffering can destroy us. It can lead to being bitter. It can lead us to be isolated. We can start to be complaining and start to be irritable. But there's another value in suffering. There's a wisdom that comes from suffering. When we're suffering, our attention is very acute. When we're suffering, sometimes we might lose our independence and become dependent on others. And this could be a very, very healthy orientation of now learning what it means to be dependent on God's loving care for us. When we talk of suffering, I wanted to bring up something that I want you to think about this. And here's my question to you. Who are beautiful people in your world? Who would you say is, wow, that woman, whoa, she's beautiful, or that guy, whoa, he's beautiful? A lot of times I think because we're bombarded by the values that are coming through television and commercialism, it's that gorgeous young woman, that has the great figure and her skin is as tight as can be, and oh my God, her facial bone structure is just ideal, and whoa, my God, she's gorgeous. Or the guy, the slim thing doesn't have the inner tube like I have and around his waist. I wanted to ask you to think about this. Is it possible that maybe they're not the most beautiful people in the world, but maybe the really beautiful people in the world are those that have given their lives to care for other people, who have wasted themselves, if you will, so that their skin is sagging, their back is weak. There are things that are not the ideals that we would find in the films and the magazines that we find at the checkout place in the grocery stores. But the person who have wasted themselves in the love of other people, and maybe they've lost their hair or it's gray, and there's the sag, and there's the things that are not part of that ideal. Would that you and I could change the orientation of our lives and find those that have been willing to embrace the sufferings of loving other people and who have had to take on the scars, if you will, the lines and what goes on. Can we really allow them to be the beautiful people? Oh, I hope what I'm saying to you is important. The Gospel of Mark is the gospel that tells us about the death of Jesus, and we struggle with death, and we know that Jesus embraced death, and we are with that. It also speaks of suffering, and may the value of the suffering that we have, the suffering that is based on loving as best we can other people, and maybe it's physical suffering, maybe it's emotional suffering, maybe it's spiritual suffering, but knowing in the death and the sufferings of Jesus, we have hope of life and victory forever. Here's a great chance for you to discover Israel, the place of Jesus. Join me, Father Mike Manning, on a 10-day custom tour of the Holy Land. Find the Bible stories and the Gospels come alive for you as you visit Caesarea and the Roman amphitheater. Experience the Sea of Galilee on which the Lord walked. Explore Capharnaum, the center of Jesus' ministry, and find the remains of the ancient synagogue. Renew your baptism at the Jordan River, where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. Walk the Via Dolorosa and spend a prayerful moment at the Garden of Gethsemane, and many more. We can guarantee that it is surely going to be a great spiritual experience for you. Using the scripture as a roadmap of the Holy Land, this is going to be a spiritual discovery. Make your life's one-time wish come true. Call the number on the screen or email us right now for more details. I'll see you in Jerusalem. We're trying to understand and appreciate the Gospels. We're looking at the Gospel of Mark. And one of the aspects that's very, very dominant in the Gospel of Mark is the reality of suffering and death. And I hope that maybe I've just pushed you to maybe pick up the Gospel and read through it and let that echo of the words that I've said, the echo kind of move through your reading. Here's some questions, though. Think about this and maybe discuss it with yourself or with others. Is there a positive side to suffering? How do you deal with your inevitable death? And what aspect of Jesus' humanity gives you the greatest consolation? And as I was trying to say, who really is the beautiful person in your life and why? Now, I hope you see a number there on the screen. Would you call us? There are people here just waiting to hear from you, and we would like to pray with you. We'd like to hear, and maybe one of the offers that we're making, we could facilitate that for you. But please get in touch with us. And you can also go to our webpage. If you go to our webpage, there's a place where there's a prayer room, and you can bring in your prayer, and you can mention that, and we'll try to bring them out and sometimes share them on the show. But there's a place there too where you can light a candle. You can light a candle on the internet. It's a marvelous thing. Please, would you do that for us? I want to pray for you, and I want to pray in union with those who have had the courage to give this call and let us know what's happening. Please pray for David in Texas. He's thinking of there have been two bishops in Syria who have been kidnapped. Charles from California, heal my eyes and my memory. Judy from Georgia, ankle and sclerosis of the liver. And Christy from Tennessee, mental illness. Lord, please heal us. Come with us. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.